Right now, from KTAB News, your local election headquarters, this is Big Country Politics.
Thanks for being here for Big Country Politics. I'm Marley Capper. There's a lot of election results to get to, but let's start with the Abilene City Council. KTAB News is your local election headquarters. First up, place one, 12-year incumbent Shane Price, who wanted to hold on to his seat. The latest numbers show he easily retained his position, Price receiving 76% of his votes. His challenger, political newcomer and Air Force reservist Stephen Hunt, getting 24%. Next is place two, and that seat is being vacated by Abilene businessman Jack Rentz. 20-year Abilene police officer Lynn Beard has been elected for the first time, gaining 83% of the votes, and his challenger, 24-year-old Garrett Hubbard, getting 17% of the votes. Now, I had a chance to sit down with each candidate during the whole campaign season and spoke with the election officials who won to see how they were doing. Shane Price, in his 12 years of service, says he's proud to have voted in City Manager Robert Hanna, and through this election has promised to work on infill development. He says he's looking forward to his continued service.
I've been honored to serve on the City Council for the past 12 years and humbled that looks like I may be selected to serve for another 3 years. So appreciative to the voters that got out and voted. It was low turnout, but do appreciate those that did take the time to get out and vote.
Next is place two, Lynn Beard. Throughout the election, one thing that he shared with me was after leaving the police force, he really missed serving the community. So he says he's ready to get back and serve.
Extremely relieved, very happy. The turnout was the margin of victories way more than anything I expected, and so I'm deeply honored to have that much confidence. I'm looking forward to getting to work at the next meeting.
Beard says his favorite part of the campaign trails was canvassing and meeting with the public to hear their issues, something he promises to continue now that he's elected. Moving across the rest of the big country, one spot on Brownwood City Council is up for grabs. Melody Novoveski taking 70% of the votes over Linda Heitman. Next up, Sweetwater, who had a mayoral race. Jim McKenzie was first elected in 2014, and he was re-elected with 73% of the votes against Brandon Cuss, who had 27%. Sweetwater also had a City Council District 1 up for grabs. Jared Seals with 76% and John McPherson with 24%. Sweetwater also had another bond for $8 million for street repairs. 53 voted no and 47% voted yes. The bond did not make it past the election. Comanche re-elected their mayor, Mary Boyd, who was first elected in 2020 with 80% of the votes over Mike Winslet, who received 20% of the votes. And for their city council, there was two open seats taken by incumbent Esmeralda Coombe, 49%, and Shane Stelnacher with 26%. Heading over to Eastland County, City Commissioner's race had 3 open seats. Now they belong to Zach Dar, who took 24% of the votes, Ben McNabb, who had 29% of the votes, and Cecile Funderburg, who had 34% of the votes. Ranger also had a mayoral race, electing John Casey with 75% against his challenger Mike Law, who had 25%. Ranger also had a city commissioner race for place 2, Kevin Moyes receiving the win with 58% of the votes on their opponents, Charles Marty McKay with 42% of the votes. Now Snyder's mayoral race, Tony Wofford had the current mayor and is not running for re-election, so Steve Rich won that with a slim 48% over the votes. Ron Shaw, who had 44% of those votes. Lastly, Snyder also had a city council race with 2 open positions, incumbent Sarah Jameson receiving 43% of the votes and Carson Matthias receiving 40%. For a comprehensive list of all the election results, go to bigcountryhomepage.com, your local election headquarters. And heading back to the Key City, Abilene is finally recovering from some of the effects of the pandemic, but the workforce needs to take jobs in order to make that happen. The Abilene Chamber of Commerce hosted a job fair last week.
Jobs.
We definitely need caregivers.
And a lot of them.
We have over 5,000 jobs that are open right now in Abilene.
Marissa Ranstead, Director of Talent Development for the Abilene Industrial Foundation, says employers in the Key City are ready to hire now.
And if the community continues to have those jobs remain open, it will have a negative economic impact on our community.
And Angel Salcedo says that's why he attended the Chamber of Commerce Hire Now job fair.
You know, our economy would drastically fail on that, and that's something I don't want to happen. And if I could do my part, I'm absolutely going to do that.
Salcedo says he knows people who have chosen not to work to reap the benefits of unemployment.
You're able to work, let's get to it, you know?
a reason why Randstad says some people haven't taken a new job yet.
Once people are on unemployment, they want to find a job that is close to the same wage as their career opportunity before, otherwise their unemployment benefits decrease.
Randstad says those benefits will go until August, but 4 months is a long time to go with thousands of open jobs.
It's not bad to have an unemployment rate of 6%. It just means that we have labor and talent available and ready to fill those positions.
We look forward to hearing from you.
Abilene has maintained one of the lowest unemployment rates in Texas throughout the pandemic, but now that our economy is bouncing back, we need people to fill the jobs to keep the boom going.
And when we come back here on Big Country Politics, an in-depth conversation with Dr. Paul Fabrizio. We're back in 2 minutes.
Big Country Politics on KTAB continues.
Well, thanks for sticking around with us here on Big Country Politics. Right now, I'm with Dr. Paul Fabrizio. He is a professor of political science at McMurray University. Well, the election is over, but we had a pretty low voter turnout. Do you mind sharing with us why it's so important that people actually go and vote for their local elections?
We have a strange situation here in the United States. The attention is focused on the national, the international level, which have the least effect on our daily lives. Local politics, local government has the greatest effect on how we live our life. And we ignore it. We don't pay any attention unless, like has happened this past week, the streets flood. You know? So what happens is in a local election where there isn't much in the way of a hot controversial issue, people don't pay attention, and it becomes a low-intensity election, and important decisions are going to be made. In this election, important decisions were made by very few people, and that's really wrong. The local elections really affect how you and I live, how we get to work, when our garbage is picked up, what about power? Things like that are all done at the local level. And by our ignoring local elections, we're letting a few people dictate our lives. And I would argue it's really a dangerous thing that we have developed in this country. And, you know, we spend so much time on the national stuff, and that's good and that's important. But if we really care about our quality of life, we have to know what's going on locally.
Definitely. I mean, two seats were open for city council. City councilors are the one who set policy. So city managers can advise the city, but it's really city councilors who are setting daily policy like you mentioned. I mean, do you think that it's just lack of people knowing, or do you think people just don't think that a local election impacts them the way it actually does?
I think partly people just don't think a local election really has the effect on them that it does. They don't see the difference that a city councilman or two can make in the overall atmosphere of the city government, in different policies, all that sort of stuff. But I think also part of it is, and this is going to probably sound lousy, but city government in a certain sense is boring. Okay, I mean, that's just the reality. I mean, there's those who really care about it and spend their life focusing on it, but it's not sexy like whether we go to war, what our relationship with China is, or an insurrection or anything like that. Nothing of the sort. This is dealing with property values. Important, but you know, you're not going to get in too many heated arguments about it. It deals with tax rates that are important, but do you really get into big arguments about it? And so that's just the reality of life, is that city government takes care of mundane, ordinary things. You know, you think about people who want to get involved in politics. You know, when they're 5 years old, they're dreaming. Do they dream of becoming a city council member, or do they dream of becoming a president? Most people dream of becoming a president, not of, oh, I'm going to worry about, I don't know what, So it's just one of those things that city government, city politics has an image problem. And I think it carries over to the elections.
Definitely. Well, I definitely see those points, and I think now that the election has kind of gone over, what are the most important topics that we should be talking about? What are citizens maybe not seeing as those sexy topics?
You know, Abilene has short-term issues, long-term issues. But I think the first thing that we have to deal with as we come out of the pandemic is the fact that there are, and you reported on this earlier this week, 5,000 jobs that are available in the city of Abilene. And on top of that, 2 weeks ago, the city announced that this cheese factory is coming, bringing an additional 500 jobs. That means 5,500 jobs are going to be available, are available, and do we have the people to fill those? In other words, where are the workers? And our city promoters, Chamber of Commerce, city officials, are they selling the city so hard that we can't meet the expectations that they're setting up? And to me, that is the number one issue that we have to deal with. And that's a short-term issue, but it's critically important. Imagine if the Great Lakes Cheese Factory company comes here, and they can't fill those jobs. What message is that going to send out to people who are here? You know, that is going to be a problem. In one of my classes, we actually watched part of the press conference where the governor announced this company was coming here. And my students were all excited. But I said, are any of you going to apply for a job there? None of them said they would. They're going to get back home. So we've got big economic issues here that are immediate, that are a real concern. And then there's a whole bunch of other things that we have to deal with, including a bond issue, that sort of thing. What do we do about fixing our streets? Of course, everything flooded this past week. You know, how do we possibly remedy that? But to me, what is most immediate is there's jobs that are begging for people.
Right. I mean, well, let's talk about those jobs. I mean, something that we have reported on and people have told us, just you referenced that story I did. This gentleman that I spoke with said, you know, he has friends and coworkers who were, I'm just going to take unemployment checks, I'm going to kind of ride the waves of those benefits, and I'm not going to work. And so now that our economy is booming and we have these jobs readily available and people just aren't taking those jobs, is it a lack of like incentives? I mean, what are the reasons that people aren't taking the jobs? Is it just the security of unemployment? I mean, that unemployment ends in August.
Right.
But 4 months is a long ways to wait for 5,500 open jobs. I mean, can you speak on that?
Right, yeah. I mean, and I think you captured the whole problem there. There are some people who see that they can do well with unemployment benefits, and so therefore they don't need to think beyond that. But those are limited. We know they're limited. They know they're limited. You need to think beyond that. So I think that's part of the problem. I think also there's the lingering effects of the pandemic. We don't talk about it much, but I think there's a lot of people who are uncomfortable getting out. Even here in Texas, even here in West Texas, I think there's people who are scared of getting the disease. And those people are not likely to apply for work unless it can be remote. So we've got to overcome those. That's going to take time to do. So, you know, 5,000 jobs. I can't get that number out of my head. You know, we're a town with 10,000 students here, college students. Is there ways that we can use and keep a lot of those students in those jobs?
Definitely. Well, when we come back here on Big Country Politics, we'll continue this conversation about what that looks like, keeping these students, maybe them getting jobs in Abilene.
Big Country Politics on KTAB continues.
Well, thank you for staying with us. We are still here with Dr. Paul Fabrizio. We're going to continue our conversation. There are 3 universities here in town, and we have 5,500 open jobs. How are we not able to get the students to stay here? They've invested 4 years of their education, and they're leaving. So is that maybe why we're seeing so many open jobs, that we aren't having these students kind of filter in and take those positions over?
I think that's something that long-term the city of Abilene has really struggled with. We don't see ourselves as a college town. Yet, in fact, if you look at the numbers, then you add TSTC to it as well, Cisco College. We have a lot of students here. We are, in fact, a college town. What we teach in the college may not translate into the jobs that are available. And I think that's one thing that's going on, is there's a misfit there in terms of what you teach in a college education and what kind of jobs you're attracting. But at the same time, we also have several high schools in the area, in town too, that could also be feeding into them. Is there things that can be done at AISD? Is there things that can be done at Wiley? And all the other school districts around that could better prepare people for those jobs, as well as what can the universities do. You know, all three of the universities here, ACU, McMurray, Hardin-Simmons, are really liberal arts schools, so they focus more on teaching thinking rather than teaching skills. And some of these jobs, I'm sure, just want skills. So that's part of the problem. But I think it can be resolved if I think there's more cooperation going on between where the jobs are and between all the educators in town. So, but the other thing I think is there's a perception of Abilene is not an exciting place. And college students come here, they have a great time, and then they look beyond that. What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? Their first thought is, I'm going to go back home, or I'm going to go to one of the bigger cities. And so I think Abilene suffers because we don't have a very exciting reputation. So in a certain sense, it's sort of like city government not being very exciting. The city of Abilene is not considered to be very exciting based on, you know, what students say and how we present ourselves as well. You know, when I first moved here 25 years ago, we were told Abilene is a nice town to raise your family. Well, if you come here without a family, what does it offer for you?
Right.
And so that is an issue that I think the city planners need to think about. And it's interesting, in the last election, there were two of the candidates who were 25. And they were looking at this from a different perspective. They said, maybe we need a different voice on the city council than just older people. I think one of the candidates actually said, you know, we got an older group of people who are running the city. And, you know, that's fine. But if you're a college town, shouldn't there be younger voices that are hearing? Shouldn't there be younger voices that are involved in things?
Right. I think part of that younger voice, too, kind of starts downtown. So something that the city council has been really forward about is wanting to make downtown walkable, wanting to make it so that you can go from the soda district and all those new bars and developments to downtown. And part of that is this idea of an entertainment district. We've been talking about it here. We've been talking about it in my reporting. And I think right now they have went ahead and approved a task force. They have assigned members to this task force. Some of these people on this task force are pastors, they're part of recovery groups. They might have a different angle against it. And if we are seeing the need for a more vibrant downtown, like you're saying, an attraction to keep young people here to take those 5,000 jobs, wouldn't an entertainment district hypothetically be that kind of missing piece to offer these young generations with something they need to do, something they can, you know, have fun on the weekends? How would that impact us if we didn't take that step? What implications would it have if we just said, we're not going to have an entertainment district?
That's a lot of questions
in
there.
Yes, loaded question.
Yeah. First of all, we don't know what the soda district is going to do. I think it holds a lot of promise. And if in fact people are allowed to wander around drinking within a certain confined area, I think that'll be a selling point to a lot of people. That could change a bit of the image of the city of Abilene. And that might be important in keeping some people here. But again, it's a gamble. We don't know. If we don't have that, then what are we doing differently to keep people here? I mean, from my perspective and from the perspective of teaching college students, I think that the idea of the soda district is fantastic. I think it has so much promise. But again, there's no guarantee it's actually going to work. And looking at it from the perspective of downtown, you know, the soda district is one place, and yet we're talking about building a hotel blocks away, not right in the center of that. And you wonder, well, are we thinking at cross purposes here? Do we have this one idea, we'll have a hotel here, another idea, we'll have the soda district here, and there's going to be no connection between the two. So I feel a little frustrated that the hotel isn't going to be where the soda district is, or the soda district isn't where the hotel is going to be. Because I think we really need to tie it all up together. You know, some of my students, they like to talk about when they go to New Orleans. You go to New Orleans, you talk about one place. You talk about Bourbon Street, okay? Here in Abilene, what do you talk about? Okay? Maybe the soda district will be it, but that's not where the hotel's going to be. That's not where shopping is going to be. Shopping is down, you know, on the south side. They're building it up on the northeast side. So, you know, we're sort of diverse, we're diffuse, but in terms of crafting an image for the city, is that really the right thing to do?
So on your point of we have a separate hotel, we have a separate soda district, wouldn't that entertainment district hypothetically kind of bridge that gap to make the walkability from the hotel to the soda district? Wouldn't that kind of promote, you know, people being able to make those connections?
I mean, I think that's the hope, but I don't see people walking that distance, okay? And I mean, in a certain sense, if you really wanted to do it, I think you'd extend that soda district and where you can drink publicly out there all the way to the hotel. So, you know, that's quite a distance. And, you know, there's some abandoned buildings along the way there. And, you know, is that something that we want to do? That would change the nature of downtown. So, do we want to go in that direction? I don't know. But right now, it seems to me that there are different developments that we're trying to do. And while they're all encompassed within a, you know, 2-mile area, they're separate things, and I don't see them connected.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for finishing off those thoughts. When we come back, we'll ask you one more question about bond elections, so stay with us. I know you guys want to hear this.
Country Politics on KTAB continues.
Well, thank you for staying with us. Some final thoughts for you. One thing I did want to ask, we are still paying off our 2015 bond, and I followed the candidates pretty closely during this city council election. In a forum, all of them said that they would approve a bond election to repair the streets. Right now, the city council's or the city's budget is about $107 million. One of the leaders pointed out it would take 3 times that just to fix all the roads. I know that's a lot of information, but is a bond election the way to go about fixing our streets?
The reality is it probably is the only way to go unless we make a concerted effort to raise our taxes now and pay for it out of current budget outlays. And there isn't any sense that we should do that. So the bond election, I think, if the voters decide to go for it, is in fact the appropriate possibility to do this thing. You know, if the voters don't want to pay for it, voters aren't going to pay for it, the bond election will be, you know, it'll end up being a losing thing. But it's really the only way to go as we look at the huge costs that we are facing.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I wanted to go ahead and ask you that question. And that does it for this week's edition of Big Country Politics. For all the latest political headlines, always go to bigcountryhomepage.com. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Thanks for watching.